a quorum. And we'll be exiting practice mode. If anybody or anything you say going forward will be recorded.
Recording in progress.
Good evening, everybody. Could you start with calling the roll, please?
Commissioner Metz.
Here.
Commissioner Tucker. Here. Commissioner Phillips.
Here.
Commissioner Croft.
Here.
Commissioner Motter, or Vice Chair Motter.
Present.
For the record, 5 present.
And do we have Greg online today?
I do not see him.
Okay. Are there any agenda changes, additions, or deletions for tonight's agenda?
I did want to mention for the informational item, there's a at places memo here. It updates some of the financial analysis which is described in the report. Just in a high-level summary, the city's sales of what we call PCC1 RECs, we had a very good hydro year, so we had some more renewable energy credits. There are actually 2 buckets in terms of excess revenue, and also there's a subset of that is being used for what we call the REC exchange program. Through council action, they took some of what we call the PCC RECs, REC 1s, substituted those with PCC RECs 3, which is at a lower value, which is out of state renewable energy credits. And that revenue goes to fund local decarb programs. So wanted to highlight that as part of that memo here. And those funds can be used locally, and it's one of the council actions. So we did want to make sure that information was accurate. So that is in front of you tonight. The other item I will mention is this is Assistant Director Carla Daly's last meeting. So she's going to be saying a couple words if that meets the chair.
That would be fabulous,
Okay,
and Ellen, you beat me to it, actually. So I did just want to thank Carla for, I don't even want to say how many years of service. I'll let you disclose that if you so desire, but the council, well, I should say, the UAC just wants to thank you for the tremendous work that you've put in to making this utility program such a success over the many years of service. So if you'd like to come up and say something now, that would be great, or if you had a better time, Alan.
So I was going through the director's report because it's very bland, and I don't want to follow Carla. So if that would be okay.
That sounds great.
Thank you.
Well, before we do that, though, let's take any public comment.
If any member of the public would like to speak on an item not on the agenda, please raise your hand or press *9 now. We have one hand raised. Dave Warner, you may speak.
Oh, there you go. Hello, I'm Dave Warner. First, you guys are a remarkable group. The depth of expertise, talent, rigor, and passion you have is amazing. Thank you for serving. I don't know how many of you followed the last-minute water supply amendment activities that went on between us and Hayward, but I would like to summarize it this way. Late in the game, Mr. Gupta and Mr. Tucker uncovered significant problems with the water supply amendment, including the fact that BOSCA cost estimates were significantly understated and that the deadline was extended. They reached out to Mayor Lawing and Councilmember Stone. They also reached out to Hayward, who had not yet approved the WSA. This created a little brouhaha, but I won't go into that. Despite these actions, Hayward approved the WSA amendment, and to my understanding, it is now a done deal. But it's worthwhile to do a quick postmortem. If we were in a world of increasing demand, the WSA amendment wouldn't be significant, but we're not. There's a wealth of evidence that declining water demand is our future, even if we have significant population growth. To see what happens when organizations project demand that doesn't occur, look no further than San Diego. In response to nearly running out of water in the 1990s, both the San Diego County Water Authority and the City of San Diego started down the path of developing their own separate alternative water supply projects. The San Diego County Water Authority built, as you know, their Carlsbad desal facility. But demand didn't grow as expected, and in June last year, they were not able to raise rates enough to cover costs and continued to deplete their reserves. This last October, the two agencies agreed to annual increases that will increase rates by 30% in 2 years. That's an affordability challenge. The story could likely be similar for BOSCA, But the potential financial consequences are far worse because the SFPUC's regional water system is a heavily debt-laden fixed cost system, while the San Diego County Water Authority is not entirely fixed cost and doesn't have nearly the debt load that the SFPUC has. How does this apply to the WSA? In a world of declining demand, we don't want to subsidize other agencies developing their own alternative water supplies. It just increases cost, which is exactly what the WSA amendment does. Mountain View, when they started down the path of developing their alternative supplies, they knew the risks, assumed demand would increase, and embarked on their plans knowing that they had a minimum purchase quantity with the SFPUC. Why should all the other agencies bail them out? At last night's council meeting in Hayward, the Bosca CEO said exactly the opposite, that we want to encourage local agencies to develop their own supplies. He doesn't get it. And not to be harsh, but neither did our water managers, embarking on the $500,000 One Water study that will sit on a shelf. To be fair, I think there was some benefit to the One Water plan, but not at a cost of $500,000. My conclusion is that I certainly need to increase my vigilance. I didn't see what Mr. Gupta and Tucker saw. I hope you and our utilities staff will increase vigilance and become more skeptical of what Bosca tells us. Despite my unintended harshness, mistakes are great learning opportunities. Paraphrasing a former boss, the only time harshness should be applied to a mistake is if participants don't embrace and learn from them. Thank you very much.
No additional hands raised.
Okay, we will proceed to approval of the minutes. Are there any comments or additions or deletions to the minutes?
I move approval of the minutes.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, could you call the roll?
Commissioner Metz,
Yes.
Commissioner Tucker, Commissioner Phillips,
Yes.
Commissioner Croft,
Yes.
Vice Chair Mater.
Yes.
Motion approves 5-0, 2 absent.
Okay, we will now turn to the Utilities Director report.
Thank you, Chair Motter. So just wanted to give you an update for the recent City Council actions at the request from the UAC. So on December 1st, Council approved the 2026 gas cost of service study and the rate changes. As you may recall, on November 18th, this went to the Finance Committee, and this body had Commissioner Gupta, and we wanted to acknowledge Commissioner Gupta's attendance to that. He did a fabulous job in highlighting some of the comments and concerns of the subcommittee and more importantly, the UAC. Also in November, the City Council approved a resolution deferring utility late fees collection actions, given the federal government was at the longest running shutdown. So what that did is for our customers that were on rate assistance programs and those folks that were federal government employees and provided us information, they would be waived some of the late fee penalties, and we would help them through a process where they could do pavements over an extended period of time. So I just want to mention that as well. There's also program design guidelines to the successor of the multifamily electric vehicle charger program and advanced HVAC pilot program. While these two staff reports come from the Public Works Department, as part of the SCAP goals. These programs are largely administered by utility staff. So just wanted to acknowledge that strong partnership of the utilities in terms of SCAP. And in talking about SCAP, there is a SCAP community workshop. This community workshop is going to be on Saturday, December 13th. And it's going to talk about the SCAP 80 by 30 greenhouse gas emission goal reduction. So I did wanted to mention that because there may be interest by this body in terms of attending. As you may recall, Commissioners Croft and Metz are the UAC representatives in the working group. If there's more than those two would want to attend, we would have to limit and want that discussion here on potentially the third commissioner. We cannot have more than 3 because that would be a quorum of this body. So I just wanted to pass that out here if there was an interest by the commissioners to attend. Again, I think Commissioner Metz and Commissioner Croft, would probably be the most likely ones to attend given that they're on that work group. And then if there's other additions, there might be a good opportunity to have that discussion here or right after.
Is there anyone interested in attending that? Or Commissioner Kraft, are you planning to attend?
I have it on my calendar. I think I have it from 9 till noon. Is that correct?
It's the Mitchell Park Community Center at El Palo Alto Room from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m.
So I would plan to attend from 9 until probably around 11, but I can't stay later. So.
Okay. And Commissioner Metz, are you able and interested in attending?
I will not be able to attend
Okay.
that day.
Are there any other commissions 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. on the 13th?
That would be a Saturday.
A Saturday.
Correct.
Are there any other commissioners interested in attending and representing the commission in that? Okay. Great. If commissioners not in attendance today are interested in doing so, could utility staff follow up
Yes.
and make that option
Yeah,
available?
I'll make that option available, and we'll track the number up to 3, and then we'll first come, first serve.
Great. Thank you.
Great. A couple other items on the utility director's report is the city recently received a gold level designation from Charging Smart. It's a program funded by the U.S. Department of Energy and implemented by the International Renewable Energy Council, and acknowledges the city's efforts in EV charging. It's one of the highest levels of designation, so we're very pleased as a city to receive that designation. And I also wanted to mention Vice Mayor Venker participated in the 30th meeting of the Conference of the Parties, COP30, the UN Framework on Convention of Climate Change. She was representing both the city of Palo Alto and the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. I believe she spoke at one or more of the events and represented information of what the city is doing at large in terms of its climate action policies and also about the utilities. And then fiber to the premises update, just want to give you a real brief update. So our fiber to the premises contractor, MP Next Level, has begun work on the first phase of that construction in the pilot area. So we've gone through and provided door hangers to the residents with a QR code if they're interested in fiber to the premises, so they can sign up for future updates. And this pilot area is bounded between Embarcadero Road, Lewis Road, Colorado Avenue, Greer, and West Bayshore Road. So work is going to be required in the backyards to string the fiber cables, and we expect them to do about 1 block per week, and that the service and work will be done by early January. And then we'll do some rollouts and outreach to those potential customers. So very excited about that. And just on a little bit on the hydroelectric updates, just a banner year for water, rainfall in terms of average precipitation. We'll be using that as we model our upcoming water and expected rates for the electric utility. So we're expecting that our hydroelectric resources will produce slightly more than the longer-term average for the rest of 26 and 27. And then on the water supply update, similarly, the regional system for SFPUC, as of November 1st, the Hetch-Hetchy system was about 160% of median for that time of the year. So we're looking also very well in terms of our water supply. And that completes my report. So I did have one item, but I'm going to go after Carla because this is going to be more of a detailed response in terms of the action and activity items. And so I'm going to let Carla go now, and then I'll bore you with that. Thank you.
Are you sure? I can let you go.
No, please.
Thank you so much, Mayor Lowing, Vice Chair Motter, commissioners. I really appreciate you letting me have the podium just for a couple of minutes. This is my last UAC meeting, and I, when I came to Palo Alto in 1991, so that you can do the math to figure out how long I've been here, I wasn't looking for a career in public service. I didn't really know where my career was going. My husband was going to be at Stanford for 2 years, and I needed a job. Hopefully one that leveraged my engineering degree and my background in energy. And lo and behold, I fell into this great job in this great organization a mile from campus. It really was kind of a miracle for that to all work out that way, honestly. Assumed I would keep the job for a couple of years and then we would move on, and I never moved on. I stayed here because there were so many amazing opportunities that were afforded to me, and I really do thank the city for the amazing career that I was able to have here. I mostly want to use this time to publicly acknowledge the employees that work for this organization. I have spent my whole career here in utilities. I will mention, when I came in '91, the very first ever Utilities Advisory Commission had just been formed by council action a few months before that time. So I've literally been here for every single commissioner who has ever sat in your positions, many of them. But you know, the people in this organization, they show up for the community and they show up for each other every single day. There was an employee survey a few years ago where one of the questions asked, how closely does the organization's mission align with your personal values? And I think it was in the range of 85% of employees in this department said it strongly aligns with their personal values. I find that extraordinary. I don't think that there are a lot of organizations that have that kind of dedication among their staff. I'd particularly like to shout out resource management, my division that I have had the privilege to lead for the past 4 years. You know, what the UAC sees from resource management is just a tip of the iceberg of the work that goes on day in and day out. We manage the commodity and transmission portfolios for gas, water, and electric. We do all the resource, all the financial planning and rate setting for those 3 utilities plus the wastewater utility. We advocate, monitor, and keep track of all of the legislative and regulatory happenings at both the state level and the federal level, impacting all of those utilities. We also manage and run and design all of the customer-facing programs for energy efficiency, water conservation, electrification, and we run the key account program where we provide white glove service to our largest utility customers and really serve as liaisons between those customers, utilities, and even the rest of the city. That is all done by 25 people. It is an incredible breadth and scope. It is a over $200 million budget. And the people who are doing that work don't do it to get rich. They do it because they believe in the mission of this organization. So I have a few of them here who work late, who voluntarily came down to show their support, I guess, for my last meeting here. But again, thank you very much. And if you're skiing, I might see you during the week, and if not, I probably won't. Thanks.
Carl, in addition to thanking you for your service, I'd like to say it's been a great pleasure working with you, both here and in the various subcommittees as well. I mean, it's not something I would have thought, but it may be partly due to you. I actually look forward to going to those meetings, so thank you very much.
Are there any other comments from commissioners?
I've enjoyed it as well. We'll be sad to see you gone and wish I could be out there on the slopes with you and wish you the best.
I just want to pile on one more small story, which is that when I was new to the commission, Carla kindly invited me to her office, and both recognized my own personal passion for water and the technical chops there, but very kindly schooled me in the kind of complexity of running a utility. And I think that the kind of mentorship that you've shown to just so many people, both within the utility and on the commission, helping us understand what your department does, what the utility does, and the role that that utility plays in the community of Palo Alto, but also the broader Bay Area, is really, really valuable. So we'll miss it. We really are grateful for the time and care that you put into making all of the past 35 years so successful, and we hope to see you on the slopes.
I'm going to say something about Carla because I get to now. But so it's been just fantastic working with Carla and the camaraderie of the team on the third floor, and and it extends to our offices and to our staff. She's just so well respected, so well appreciated, and respected throughout the industry, that it's just been a pleasure to serve with her, even though it's been for this short amount of time. So we wish her well after 34 years of dedicated service to this community, which is just frankly amazing. So wish her well in her retirement. And I know the staff, while they are very interested in the UAC, I think they'll probably exit after this speech. So don't take it professionally. So Carla, you're fantastic. I know we have a few more weeks to spend, and I know there's a large action item list that I just dropped on your desk, so I appreciate that. I do have one more slide just to go back to the normal day-to-day business. One of the items that came from the commission, and I wanted to thank Vice Chair Motter, was just to provide in the Utilities Director's report some of the action and activity items that the commission wanted to. So these are kind of what we thought were the top ones on the list. Apologize for some of this reformatting, but you wanted to talk about your discussion on policy procedure. That is going to item 4 on the agenda, and this is how you wanted to interact potentially with council and that representation. I think Commissioner Gupta mentioned the forever chemicals and microplastics and the question on that, so we just qualified that. The work plan is really on the source water quality, and the wastewater testing was not in that work plan, so I did have a conversation with Commissioner Gupta. The gas transition study presented preliminary results to the UAC in September and October. We're expected to come back in the early 2026 timeframe, and I'll look probably to Assistant Director Abendschein if that's changing. And then the time of implementation, you did want to have an update of what that marketing and outreach look like, so we'll bring that back as part of the rates. The reserves questions and the reserves evaluations, that was a comment that we heard not only from the UAC, but the Finance Committee. So we are doing that internal evaluation, and we'll bring back some recommendations probably in the first quarter of 2026. And then what's happening in affordability, the impacts to the federal impacts. So we have some initial estimates on that. It's still ongoing. We're going to bring that back. There is some discussion whether that should be a part of your potential discussion on a subcommittee in terms of what that looks like for rates and what those projections could be. So that might be an opportunity to have that discussion there. And then Commissioner Metz, there was some follow-up that I was going to have with you in terms of one of your comments from the last meeting on the reliability and resiliency strategic plan, the standard operating emergency procedures, the differences with that. We had conversations with our emergency operations divisions here at the city, so wanted to kind of just drill down to those specifics and then bring that back. So these were the highlights from the last meeting, not a comprehensive list, but did want you to note that we are tracking this. We'll be providing some updates. And then wanted to receive any feedback, probably not maybe here at the meeting, but commissioners, your timeline, we can refine this and see better ways to present this to this body.
Right, so just to clarify, in bringing this up in the director's report, these items are not agendized, so we cannot talk about them. But one of the processes that we had discussed at the end of the last meeting was just stronger feedback loops between topics that we bring up at the end of meetings and follow up in terms of when, where, and how those would be discussed. So I did ask that to be a standing component of the Utilities Director report. Again, when we report out on those are not topics of conversation for the night, but this gives you both assurance that the Utilities Director is, and the Chair and Vice Chair are working that into the agenda or are managing those issues on a one-on-one basis as most appropriate. If anyone has concerns with the way in which we are kind of blocking and addressing these respective issues, again, you can either come to me, to Chair Scharf, or to Alan. Okay?
Can I ask a question?
Please.
So up till now, with the director's report, we've been able to ask questions of
Yes.
things that are in the director's report?
That's correct.
And so, like, for example, I mean, in today's time of use is in the Reliability and Resiliency Strategic Plan. It's scheduled to roll out in January, the very first pilot. So I had actually hoped we would hear something about it before then, because I was hoping that we could be part of it. And so it says that we'll see it again with electric rates in 2026, but that sounds later than I was hoping to hear. And I would have asked about it in either this time or during the.
Yeah, I mean, that's not a, I think I will also defer to people who know policy better. We just can't have like full discussion among us on these topics just because we are doing follow-up. But what we can do is ask about how we are blocking, or not blocking is not like what, but how we're tackling these different items and whether we need to accelerate or change the process by which we're addressing these items.
Okay, so my comment stands, I guess I'd like to kind of get a more up-to-date, either in the director's report, as we go month by month on where we are with that.
Yes, and this is, again, a high level. As you may recall, when we did the presentation, not only in the TOU rates, we had a small subset of customers that we were going to roll it out with as kind of our beta testers in terms of what that looks like, and do outreach and work out all the kinks, and frankly, in that regard. And then we also had a timeline of also the communication. So we had our communications manager, Catherine Elvert, come and kind of talk through that. So point well taken. We'll take that as something that we can work on in terms of that cadence and when it's going to come to this body.
I just want to say thank you very much for doing this. It's terrific to have this as part of, I think, what you called standing or monthly, and this is a great start. As we go forward, maybe just a little bit more precision, like we hope to get this on the February agenda or the March or whatever it is. Procedurally, I can't help but wonder whether it be possible for this to be on public record, this one slide to be part of the package, so that one could at least spend a moment, not a lot of time, but a moment, if necessary, to just tap a little bit into any one of the issues. But I heard what we've said already, and I just think it's a great start. Thank you.
One suggestion, could we, I understand we can't discuss these topics in depth, but could we agendize for future meetings, a brief discussion of the timing and scope of each of these topics?
I think absolutely that can happen actually at the end when we, on a bi-monthly basis, have the, excuse me, have the standing item of topics for future meetings.
Right.
That's when we can bring these back up.
Okay, because it'd be good to be clear about when are we going to discuss each item and what is the scope of the discussion?
Yeah, absolutely.
And, provide feedback and such. Okay,
Yeah.
great.
So that happens every other month, but we'll do follow-up every month so that people can keep track of what happened at the past meeting and make sure that it's been addressed. Okay, great. All righty. Any other utility director report items, or are we?
I am done, thank you.
Excellent. Okay, we'll move on to new business. Item 2, recommendation that the city council accept the evaluation of local energy resources to lower costs and improve reliability and resiliency. Report to complete reliability and resiliency strategic plan strategies 4 and 5, and that the city council direct staff to pursue various activities related to flexible energy resource and efficient electrification to improve reliability and resiliency. CEQA status and not a project.
Excuse me, Vice Chair Mater. Before we continue to item number 2, would you like to return to public comment? We did receive one request subsequent to the agenda item.
Sure, I'd be happy to return to public comment at this time, and then we'll, as long as I don't have to read that again.
Okay. All right, if any member of the public would like to speak on an item not on the agenda, have Avit.
My name is Avivit. I'm a resident for the past 25 years, and I'm very happy that I live in Palo Alto and get services from utilities. For Palo Alto utilities, it's a significant difference compared to other districts. So I want to start with that. Then I would like to share with you my concern. The reason that I'm here is because I feel that Urban First abused their power for clearing the power lines in my property easement in October and November of this year, twice this year, although they're supposed to come once every 2 years. There's a solution to stopping this process, which is utilities undergrounding. I read the information on the website and was in touch with electrical engineering to better understand the utilities undergrounding plan. I also read 2 summaries of the UAC from 2010 and 2019 to understand where we are. The website says, since 1965, the City of Palo Alto Utilities has administered an ongoing program to convert overhead utilities lines, including electric, telephone, and cable TV facilities, to underground. 1% of the electric revenue are spent on undergrounding each year. This level of funding will underground approximately 100 homes per year. City Council creates an underground district by passing an ordinance which amends the underground district into municipal code. This occurs after a public hearing to take comments from the public. The city prepares a 5-year budget each year. The underground utilities map shows the next several planned underground districts. Planning is not done beyond a 5-year planning horizon. This is because the decision to underground is based on, in part, on the condition of the electric system, which constantly changes due to renovations and new construction. At the current rate of undergrounding, it will take more than 50 years to complete the entire city. These were quotes from the website, what appears at least 2 days ago. According to the underground conversion plan map, no district was undergrounded in the years 2011 to 2019 and 2022 to 2025. Clearly, there are no 100 homes per year that get underground. Where did the money that was allocated at the time went to? Is it being accumulated in a specific account for the underground purpose? Was it repurposed? And where was the process to repurpose it? I was told that effectively, utilities, based on another city council decision, focus on upgrading the grid, and it is translated to not doing undergrounding. It is unclear to me if the funding comes from the same sources. If it is, was the process approved by you to reallocate these funds? And if it was not, why are we not moving forward with undergrounding? Thank you for your time.
All right, we have Jonathan Aberstein giving the staff presentation on item number 2 on the agenda. Do you want to take that over?
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Jonathan Abenschein, Assistant Director for Climate Action with the Public Works Department. I'm really glad to be talking to you tonight about this project joint partnership between the utilities and the Public Works Department, the Climate Action Team. We spoke about this, this topic with the UAC just a couple of months ago. I do want to refresh, just provide a little bit of background for any members of the public who are watching and just for the record, but I'll try to keep that brief so we can get into the discussion, because I expect people remember that discussion and most of the background. Next slide, please. Right, so we're here to, I'll just be recapping a little bit about the study, the basics of the study results, and I'll talk a little bit about the staff recommendation, and I will own that gigantic title that you had to read, and hopefully you won't have to read it again. Essentially what we're asking tonight is to accept the consultant report and recommend the council direct staff to focus primarily on barrier reduction with the different technologies considered in this study, periodically update the cost-benefit analysis, look at certain projects as opportunities arise, and then bring forward some additional discussion on long-term resiliency in 2026. Next slide, please. Okay, so the objective of this study focused on flexible energy technologies and efficient electrification. By that I mean, by flexible energy technologies, I mean solar, storage, vehicle to grid. And it was focused on three different areas. What's the role of these technologies in reducing electric supply costs? Is it possible to defer distribution investment? And how can these technologies enhance short-term reliability and long-term resiliency? Next slide, please. The study has been, it grew out of conversations in the early days of the SCAP and the development of the Climate Action Team when we were working with the council's ad hoc Climate Action Committee and various stakeholders, their working group and the working group teams, and the issues around distribution challenges continued to come up, as well as interest in these technologies more broadly. So the development of a reliability and resiliency strategic plan was put into the SCAP work plan to address that. That was approved in 2024. There are a number of traditional utility operational and capital investments included in that plan. There's a status update in the staff report on many of the strategies and actions associated with the RRSP. But strategies 4 and 5, we're looking at the objectives I was just talking about. Over the last year and a half or so, we have been proceeding with a consultant study. We've had several conversations with the UAC and the Climate Action and Sustainability Committee, including over the summer, where we reviewed some preliminary results from the study and got some feedback on potential policy direction. Next slide, please. So the results of the study, just at a very high level, we evaluated, so the study evaluated the potential benefits and costs of different technologies in these 3 different areas. All of the technologies had benefits. I think entering into this study, we are coming from a place of support for all these different technologies, trying to reduce barriers, making it easy for people to install these technologies voluntarily, but this analysis was about whether we want to go further, whether we want to provide incentives, whether we want to provide intensive programs using, finding a revenue source for these. And so we looked at whether these have a positive cost benefit sort of at a community level. Will installing these devices lower costs for the community overall, like you would look at for energy efficiency, for example. And none of these technologies had benefits outweighing the costs, which would have made incentives worthwhile. with the asterisk that at an individual building owner level, to the extent that they value the long-term resiliency that solar and storage brings, that they may be willing to spend the extra money to put these technologies in place. Large-scale commercial solar and storage was about break even and could be cost-effective on a case-by-case basis. And batteries, large-scale commercial batteries were close. We didn't evaluate the cost and benefit of time of use rates because we are proceeding with that, but we did evaluate the potential savings and benefits. Next slide, please. So this just shows at a high level, these are in the report. These charts show for residential projects for these technologies that the costs do not outweigh the benefits. But again, when we do see these projects going in, and to the extent that people see a benefit in long-term resiliency, which is not captured on these charts, individual building owners may be interested in proceeding with projects. Next slide, please. And then when it comes to commercial results, again, these charts reflect some of the gaps in many of the technologies that we evaluated, but the fact that solar and storage, BESS stands for Battery Energy Storage System, is break even when you count both the utility supply cost benefits and the short-term reliability benefits. Next slide, please. So we did talk with both the UAC and the Council's Sustainability Committee over the summer. We presented a straw proposal policy approach and got some feedback, again, focusing on outreach and barrier reduction rather than incentives. And most of the comments that we received showed some general agreement, agreed with the sort of general focus of the policies, but there were a number of edits that we've incorporated into the staff recommendation tonight. Recommendations included making sure to explore low-cost technical assistance, maybe not intensive programs, but low-cost technical assistance, doing regular updates to the cost-benefit analysis. There was a comment from the committee about forecasting technology cost decreases, and I have a slide on that in a moment. And then there was agreement that no further analysis was needed on deferring distribution investment, that the cost benefit was not strong enough to support further analysis. But there was an interest in additional discussion on long-term resiliency, with some of the dimensions being discussed around low-income residents and the ways in which private facilities that are of benefit to the community would benefit from long-term resiliency. So we are definitely proposing to come back and have more further discussion on that in 2026, based on your feedback. Next slide, please. This is just an additional results slide that shows the forecasts of improvements in the cost-benefit analysis, or the cost-benefit for solar plus batteries. And you can see that that commercial batteries and solar are forecasted to become above break even in the next few years, if the trend continues the way it's forecasted in these charts. Residential takes longer, but it does show that there could be some potential for these sorts of projects in the coming years. Next slide, please. And so this slide just shows the staff recommendation. I won't read it in detail. Next slide, please. It continues on to 2 slides. And I am noticing that there's I had a note on here that I don't think got updated into the slide deck, that on November 20th, just before the Thanksgiving break, the Climate Action and Sustainability Committee heard this same topic and voted unanimously to approve the staff recommendation, and they chose to look at the optional alternative 2B shown in the staff report, which is focused on, they chose to recommend the optional alternative. So that, that involves, if you can go back 1 slide, please. B is the second hashed bullet there, promote demand response, solar photovoltaics, and so on. And the idea was we were expecting to be able to do that sort of as staff time is available, and that additional resources would be needed to take a regular proactive approach to this demand reduction. Right now, as we discover a barrier, we'll address it. We'll devote staff time to addressing it. But if we wanted a higher level of effort, actually having someone who's actively going out there and seeking barriers rather than waiting until we hear about them, that would require additional resources, and the committee did vote to pursue that, which would mean trying to find room for a half-time hourly in the FY27 budget. So dependent on being able to find those resources.
All right, so are you done with this, President?
Yeah.
Fabulous. So the way that we're going to proceed tonight is that Commissioners Croft and Metz, because of their role as SCAP liaisons, are invited to speak and offer comments reflecting their experience interacting on these topics very deeply. And so we'd love a report back to the UAC broadly. We'll give Jonathan an opportunity to respond to those comments so that there's kind of closure there. Then we're going to invite public comment, and then we'll open it up for broader commissioner discussion. Okay? So Commissioners Croft and Metz, would either of you like to start or offer any higher level commentary around both process and your own recommendation, having dug deeply into this topic over the past several months?
Well, I could just touch on the experience with the group.
Great.
And I thought it was a great group, very diverse. Many of the folks on there were very knowledgeable, and I think there were some excellent discussions and all kinds of brainstorming kinds of ideas about how to address energy, and not necessarily agreement on every topic, but it exposed a lot of ideas, and I thought it was a valuable discussion.
And Commissioner Croft?
Yep. I don't know if everyone had a chance to review the report, which is very long and very detailed, and it has some really nice reviews of possible technologies that we can look at in the future. I think, this topic came here before, and all of us, I think the general impression amongst us commissioners was that it was disappointing that nothing penciled out right now, and it leaves us in the position of simply promoting the things that we think might help, but not incentivizing anything. So I wasn't surprised by the action items. I did not have any problem with the action items. However, I did have two slight edits that I don't know if they're even relevant, given that the committee has already voted on them, but I'll describe what they are here, and I gave those in the working group. So there is a deliverable, which was, a model, and the model has a lot of inputs, including prices of all these technologies, but also electricity costs. And I had asked whether the model could be updated annually rather than every 2 years, just for the electricity costs, because my concern was there's so much in the news about increasing demand for energy, and that possibly electricity prices could change faster. If they increase a lot faster than what we expect, things might change, and we might want to assess it a little bit quicker. And so I think the feedback from staff had been that that would be possible, and that was my suggestion, was to update the model annually for electricity prices. The second comment was just on item D in the packet, which was, as opportunities present themselves and to the extent staff time is available, evaluate large-scale solar and battery opportunities. And I just said solar and/or battery opportunities, since I think there's interest in either those both or separate. And so those were my suggestions to the draft at that time. So you guys can comment on whether there's any ability to edit, given that the committee has already voted, but that was the limit of my changes, or my suggested changes.
Thank you so much for those very helpful comments, and for both your and Commissioner Metz's time engaging with this important topic. Do you want to respond to those comments and specifically to Commissioner Croft's questions?
Yeah, and I can add my own notes from the working group and the Sustainability Committee if you like. I will say that we are taking this to council as an action item, so there is definitely room to incorporate. The fact that the committee's voted is not conclusive. It's not going on consent, so that means that there are opportunities for the council to take the two bodies' recommendations and reconcile them. So I think very much worth considering potential amendments.
Jonathan, can I ask very specifically how we would then amend this slide to reflect that?
So you would make a motion and you would move the staff recommendation with the following amendments.
Okay.
Point of clarification on the staff recommendation. Is the staff recommendation A or B, or what exactly, if we voted the staff recommendation, is it different from what the SCAP committee?
The staff recommendation we're bringing to you is the same, except it did not, except the recommendation that's in your staff report does not include, or it doesn't include the optional alternative 2B as the staff recommendation. It's still presented to you as an optional alternative, so if you wanted to align with the committee and incorporate that optional alternative, then you would need to include that in your motion.
That would be a somewhat different motion than if we just said.
And if you just move the staff recommendation, exactly.
Thank you.
Yeah, unless you want to hear my notes from the working group and the committee, that's all I would have to say in response.
Would anyone like to hear the working group committee notes?
I mean, is there anything particularly relevant? I don't know what that means. Is that a half hour of notes or 2 minutes? Then I would like to hear it.
Okay. So what we heard from the working group were some of the notes that Commissioner Croft had noted, the suggestions that Commissioner Croft had noted, and also comments from Commissioner Metz that I think were submitted in writing to the committee, and I expect maybe spoken about later tonight about long-term resiliency. There was general support for continued focus on permit streamlining and other forms of streamlining, and that was at the working group. And then at the committee, there were some questions about batteries at substations. There was optimism about the trends with the commercial cost benefits, and just noting that residents, or some residents, very clearly value the long-term resiliency, because we do see these projects going forward, and there was a lot of interest in having those resiliency discussions in 2026. So those were the themes that were highlighted, but overall, the committee and the working group were supportive of the staff recommendation.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question about the committee's recommendation for 2B, optional 2B? So Can you explain again what the resource requirement would be if we were to move forward with that?
Yes, it's in the fiscal impact section of the staff report, and it specifically talks about a half-time hourly position. That person would be focused on actively developing a list of potential barriers to address and spending time talking with the utilities and planning and development services teams and the program teams to find ways to deal with those barriers one by one. But it does require time.
And what would be, sorry, I don't remember where that was in the report, but approximate financial impact?
We'd have to come back to you with that. Now that we're hearing that there's interest, I think we'd come back via the budget process, and that proposal could be taken or not taken.
Okay.
Okay, so on packet page 34, the second bullet under recommended actions above require resources as follows. There's a sentence at the end that says if a higher level of effort's desired, a half-time hourly budget, and it would probably require some additional time in hourly staff time, or communication staff time to devote, that those resources would be needed, but it doesn't put a cost to it. So we'd have to, if there's interest, we'd have to come back through the budget process and talk about that.
Okay. That's helpful. I want to now open the floor to public comment.
If any member of the public would like to speak on item number 2, please raise your hand or press star 9 now. No hands raised.
Okay. So now we can go on to open discussion as a commission. Thank you all for your patience. And invite both open discussion and then ultimately a motion, a second, and a vote on this. We can also obviously propose amendments and maybe get some help in crafting that in real
The
time.
annual.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was going to say, I'm happy to hear that the committee in general supports more intensive work on these. However, one of the concerns I have is how ready just the market is for the technologies that we want people to start adopting. Because one of the questions I had for myself is like, who exactly would we get to advise on, be more advanced on trying to advocate for vehicle to grid or something that, not that many cities have done yet. So I'm not really sure how much I advise pushing those things more. I did have a question too on demand response. I saw that in the things we're promoting, but I can't recall what exactly we have that's live in demand response. I didn't think we had any live demand response programs. That's just a comment and a question. Do we have any demand response programs right now?
We don't have active demand response programs right now.
It's the first thing in what we're promoting, so that seems a little bit wrong, right? That, I support the other things that we're listing there, but it seems inaccurate to put that there. So I'd propose removing that item.
Jordan, am I correct? And this could be a mistake on my part, but I thought that we had some program on the books for a large industrial customer, period, singular, but that it was not is it only time of use, or is it also DR?
Yeah, I mean,
I mean, that's a price-based DR instead of incentive-based DR, but, yeah.
Yeah, when the state declares a grid emergency, we have, like many other utilities, called on people with diesel or battery backup generators to run them. Yes, so we do have that kind of a program. And I think in the absence of a demand response program, what gets promoted is technologies that are able to respond to grid signals.
If I could address it, one source of confusion is we have a program called demand management, which is really an energy conservation program. It's not a demand response program where companies are, contractually obligated to cut back and paid for doing that. We don't have that, really.
Couple questions, and then I'll kind of comment on where I'm at. It's interesting, it says about, on packet page 47, 10 years ago, we'd implemented a commercial customer summer demand response program that had about 6 commercial customers, but not very effective, the 200 to 500 kilowatt thing. What was is there any color on that, commentary on that, why that was such a failure? I mean.
It was for the exact reasons that demand response is presented as challenging here, as well as that the amount of savings that you can generate compared to the amount of time that it takes to run the demand response program at a scale this small ends up giving you a negative cost benefit. When you set up the infrastructure to run a demand response program over a territory as large as PG&E's, especially when you have the much peakier loads that the Central Valley does, for example, you can get a positive cost benefit. But in a small place like Palo Alto without peaky loads, it just doesn't pencil out. So we ran a pilot. It did achieve results, but it cost more than the benefit we got.
So you kind of naturally got me to the second point, which is in the consultant's report. It quite interestingly points out that part of the problem with this is that we are so small, and that the overhead of running one of these programs, is a fixed cost more or less just to run the program with a with the variable cost side, and that fixed cost is hard to overcome. And the question, which is kind of an open-ended question, is there a way we could cooperate with some other, Santa Clara, Alameda, some other relatively small to run these programs jointly and save cost? It's out of the scope of this discussion, but maybe something that, I would love people to think about, because again, I appreciate. And then coming down, reading this, and where I am is I'm leaning toward I mean, we just came off a discussion last month of, how the rates are going to go up, and up at unacceptable rates. It's a relatively small amount of money, presumably, but, if we don't ever toe the line and say, here's something that isn't worth the cost according to our consultants, but we are going to go ahead and do it anyway, or spend money on it, I don't know, it just doesn't feel right to me in the climate, and again, I'm influenced by some of the things that the city council is facing too, totally separate, but, budget deficits stretching as far as the eye can see, which means that, there's not going to be relief on the gas part of our rates for any time soon. So just as kind of I'd love to do it. I mean, like everybody else, I'd love to have seen, this thing has a huge benefit relative to the cost, let's do it. The cost will be paid for by lowered bills from others. But given that it's not going to lower the bill costs in the short run, and it's going to cost us on the supply side, I can't support option B, so I would be supporting option A at this point.
Can I clarify that what we're all talking about in terms of B is this alternative to B, but you still support staff recommendation 1, and then 2A, B, C, D, and E?
I guess. I
Okay.
have to go
No,
look at that.
I think we should be technically correct there, because it's this alternative to B that SCAP
It's the alternative to recommendation 2B that
Okay,
they passed.
great. So you do not support the alternative recommendation 2B, but you do otherwise support the items proposed in the original staff recommendation.
Yes.
Excellent, great.
If I could just add on to just one of Commissioner Phillips' comments on demand response programs. So we do active outreach to other agencies. So SMUD, Sacramento Municipal Utilities District, one of the largest, frankly, municipal utilities, they have a virtual power plant program as well. So we're reaching out to see what those costs and overheads look like. Again, they're larger in size. They're in an area that has very high loads, but what other programs being offered through other providers that may not have the same administrative costs that we would if we ran the program. So it's something on outreach that we are continuing with above and beyond. But again, some of the challenges we have is our rates are relatively low. So that comes into the cost as well, and I think you see that theme kind of explored, into this report.
Yeah.
And I just want, oh, sorry.
No, I'd say, though, that kind of underscores Commissioner Croft's recommendation that we also go back and revisit very simple rate analyses on a year-to-year basis, because if those rates do change, the calculus behind these types of programs may also change. I would say that's especially true if we ever saw a time of use rate that had a spread of more than I don't want to quote the specific number of cents, but we have such a small peak-off-peak ratio in our time of use rates that there isn't a strong motivation or financial driver for a lot of these technologies. But if the time of use rate structure evolved then to reflect actual costs, because the cost of electricity at different times of day may change, then it could be worth re-updating or at least revisiting this analysis more frequently. I don't know. I mean, I guess I'd appreciate staff commentary on is it unrealistic to do this yearly? Is it a waste of time, or is that actually valuable?
I'll maybe call the Assistant Director for Resource Management to answer that before she retires.
As she comes up, some of these VPP programs that are being offered in PG&E service territory, because it's called on grid higher costs, you'll see a higher per kilowatt cost, so it's above and beyond what the normal TOU rates are. So I just wanted to point that out. So there is a value to the customer, but those are the programs we're taking a look at.
Yeah, I think I actually did speak up during the committee meeting as well, that updating energy prices is not a big lift. I mean, we're updating our energy prices all the time, and so it's a matter of just taking what we're doing anyway and putting it in the model. I would clarify that, redoing the time of use rates every year is a different thing. So I want to just make that clear that would be a much bigger lift. But yeah, updating energy prices is not a big lift.
Just to clarify, I was not proposing that we redo TOU prices every year, but as TOU prices change, that is one of the stronger drivers of the calculus behind the viability of a lot of these, or it could be. Yeah.
Well, I mean, and the input of the energy supply prices will capture the drivers behind the TOU rates, just the TOU rates won't be updated, that's all. The only other thing I just wanted to add, just following on, I think a lot of the discussion here is focused on the idea that we would be promoting demand response, and maybe the way this is phrased is not the cleanest. the intent here was promote and reduce barriers to adoption for these technologies. And I think demand response would be more towards reducing barriers to adoption by looking for partnerships, looking for ways to automate and reduce, looking at auto DR, which we do look at periodically. Whereas for solar photovoltaics, it's more promotion and barrier reduction. So I think some of this is driven by the way this is phrased a little bit, and if there are suggestions on ways to phrase it better, I'd be happy to take that.
A couple questions. Well, I guess one would be, how does this recommendation take us much further than what I believe has already been decided and implemented under the name of Strategy 3? How is this really any better?
It doesn't really take us further. Strategies 4 and 5 were to see whether whether there was a cost benefit, whether there's a positive cost benefit to going further. And
obviously, the whole 100+ pages of report and analysis are sitting on two really big asterisks or caveats. Number one, we're not assigning any value to the long-term resiliency that might come from DER or local resources. And number two, we don't calculate in savings from deferred or avoided spending and investment in the grid. No one's suggesting taking that to zero. This would all of course, just be partial or shaving or reductions. But when you make carve-outs or caveats that big and that strategic, I can't help but feel the analysis is doomed from the start. There are several mentions of an old or previous consulting study on deferring grid investment. And in the consultant's report, it talks about this study of, it looks like it's hundreds of Powerwall, like Tesla Powerwall batteries, so residential battery. I'd love us to focus a lot more on other BESS solutions, like at the substation level or even the neighborhood level, if there is such a thing. But just to stick with this report, my question is, I looked everywhere for a link to the report. I searched the web for a link to this thing. I think the company is called Energia that we paid to do this report. I can't find it. And the summary that's referred to multiple times in the long consulting report was not very persuasive. Did we link to the report?
so I just want to, I'm going to clarify a few things here. This report did take into account short-term reliability.
Short-term.
And it took into account long-term resiliency in a qualitative, from a qualitative perspective. And some of the points that were discussed in Section 7 will be brought back in 2026, assuming the staff recommendation proceeds. As for grid investment, the study that you're referring to is not an old study that was done a while back. It was a study done this summer.
This summer.
To complement the Bureau Happold study. And there is no formal report. The formal report is the summary in that consultant study, or in the consultant study attached to this staff report.
Oh, in the current packet.
Yeah, that is
I see.
everything that you get. And that was because what we were trying to do, as we looked at the cost benefit, we were running some back of the envelope numbers and seeing that this was just the costs were way higher than the benefits. And part of the issue was that
way higher, I'm sorry to interrupt, way higher, we might have to dig into the weeds more than you want, but, in that one study, it talks about 1.0 million of CapEx versus 1.3 million of debt service. If you I think that's for the deferred spending, but it's not as if it were order of magnitude or even 2x difference. It looked to me close enough to stretch and reach.
Okay, I'll remove the way higher, but what I will say about that 1.3 million per year versus the 1.0 million in benefits, is that that was the capital cost only. It didn't include the cost of operating the program, of operations and maintenance on all the equipment that would be needed. It also didn't address feasibility as well. Now, a lot of the technologies that would be needed to run a grid investment deferral program like that are experimental at the moment and not widely commercially deployed. And so you run into a lot of extra costs from trying to be on the cutting edge. It's something that is easier for a much larger utility than a small utility.
That may
to
be,
do.
but I don't see it in the report. Like, there are utilities around the state that are deploying substation level, grid scale battery storage. You can call it cutting edge, but they're doing it. And I don't see discussion of who they are and what their success and failures are.
Yeah.
It's just sort of stated that these are cutting edge and it's too dangerous for us.
Well,
and that, go ahead.
Yeah, let me, so there is discussion in the report about the additional complexities. The report doesn't address substation transformer deferral. It doesn't address that. And we have our Chief Operating Officer and Chief Operating Officer Terry Crowley, who can speak to that if you want to talk about substation transformers. But this back of the envelope study, I wouldn't say back of the envelope, but this study this narrower study was focused on whether we can avoid replacing transformers at the distribution level, which are needed for the additional capacity that's needed to accommodate vehicle and building electrification. That was the topic.
I'm sorry, to accommodate what?
Vehicle and building electrification. So that was the
EVs,
topic
yeah.
that was coming up in the early discussions with the SCAP, which was saying that the transformers weren't sized to accommodate large-scale vehicle and building electrification. So that's where the grid modernization study came. But there was a question on whether it would be possible to just install batteries and solar or vehicle to grid and be able to avoid some of these distribution upgrades. And we had a budget of $200,000 to try and do a comprehensive study of this question. And as we started looking at it, we said, well, maybe we can save some money and not do that full consultant study. Let's do a smaller study using some simulations and some targeted analysis to see whether it even comes close. And what we found was that the costs exceed the benefits, even when you exclude many of the costs that you would experience doing a program like this. And on top of that, you're not going to avoid those costs of investment, you're going to defer them. And you're going to defer them for some number of years. There were a limited number, because of the age of the system, there were a limited number of transformers that were eligible for deferral, so the total potential benefit was relatively small. And you also just have to think a little bit about construction cost escalation, which seems to continue to grow. And would we be paying more for this same infrastructure down the line?
Okay.
Yeah.
There are several references in the document to, quote, reducing the strain on the grid, page 34, for example. I can't read that there's this notion of reducing the strain on the grid without thinking that, wow, if it could do that, then we might reduce we might shave some of the investment needed to modernize and extend and expand the grid. It could only be good. And yet the only study that we're referred to is this 362 or 326, there's a typo in the guy's report. I don't know how many small batteries there are, but that's a bunch of Tesla Powerwalls. Instead of probing the question of whether the thing you've just been speaking about, grid scale storage would have a beneficial impact.
Yeah, I think it's important to talk about supply, about reducing the strain on the electric grid from an electric supply standpoint, which is really at an aggregate and almost statewide perspective, versus reducing the strain on a single individual.
I'm sorry, I'm talking about the Palo Alto grid.
No, I understand, but I'm coming to that, versus reducing the strain on a single individual transformer. When you're talking about reducing strain on the grid in terms of whether you have enough generation, whether you need to build more generators, action across large populations can make a real difference. You may get a certain amount of load reduction that avoids having you having to build a peaker plant, even if people aren't, aren't turning off that air conditioner every single afternoon. As long as you have, 1 million people, 20% of whom turn it off, some of the afternoons, in aggregate, it'll all reduce the peak load. But when you're talking about 5 homes, 8 homes, those homes need to do it every single afternoon if you want to avoid the distribution transformer impact. And that's why you need something like a battery that you can control that's going to be reliably cutting load every single evening. And that's the difference. When you talk about voluntary use of energy in off-peak periods, reducing strain on the grid, that was something that you referred to. That's an aggregate energy supply strain as opposed to an individual transformer strain. And so,
I appreciate
and
you
so it doesn't
explaining.
have to be controlled as tightly.
I appreciate you explaining, and I think I mostly follow. I'll just wrap up my comments more to my colleagues here, because we've spoken offline, you've been helpful. I won't be supporting this, and certainly not with the option B that, makes our cheerleading efforts, I'm sorry, even more expensive. They would be nothing more than just enabling and cheerleading. I find the entire approach lacking in vision and commitment. So Palo Alto is proud to be one of the leaders in moving to carbon neutral power. We are small. I realize we're smaller than Sacramento. I realize that we are cursed with bad weather or good weather. Our weather is so good that, people don't need air conditioning as much as they do elsewhere. And we're cursed with really favorable good rates. Our power is cheap, so you can make less of a dent with the TOU pricing. I get that. But still, I think there's no doubt to me, looking at Palo Alto's climate action strategies, our 80 by 30, that we want to be leaders. We want to show ourselves and the world that we can, move into an energy future. And the energy future is this stuff. It's this local energy resource. It's microgrids. It's battery storage. When we cheered on our recent 50 megawatt deal with Trolley, our first battery storage deal, that's great. But in City Council, there was discussion. This is good, but when might we have storage here in town that, is beyond the risk of our single point of failure, the one transmission line, for example. And, I just don't see in any of this a sort of go to the moon, we have to make it happen. We have to try harder to, make the math pencil out, as opposed to every 2-3 years just going through the list and saying, well, vehicle to the grid doesn't work. And microgrids don't pencil out either. I mean, even with examples like large commercial BESS, we talked about this, where it does go over the line, even with the caveats that I've mentioned. Why can't we consider a program to aggressively go after those commercial prospects who could prove out that technology? What happened to the airport and wastewater treatment plant project? I reviewed the notes and I remember some of the questions the last time we talked about this. There are challenges, of course, but the whole thing just feels like we're not committed to finding one of these technologies that does fit Palo Alto and making it work.
If I just could just make some clarifying comments to that, and appreciate meeting with Commissioner Tucker in regards to some of those responses and information. So just a point of clarification, we do have one transmission corridor that comes into Palo Alto. There's actually 3 lines that come in, as you may recall, the California corridor. So under the same kind of pathway. Right, so, and we are going to be moving forward, and CAISO is moving forward with putting in a second transmission line, and that may be happening sooner because it's going in an existing corridor or existing lines. But, you know, as we look at battery storage, if we look at these technologies, you know, affordability is high on the list, and making sure it does pencil, that we're spending the money wisely, that we're working with our partners and customers and promoting technologies that are affordable and meet that cost-benefit ratio. You did mention the trolley project. The city has in the past presented to City Council on occasion where it didn't make sense to do battery storage projects, right? And we came back and ran that analysis again and again, and then it has. So those things do change over time, you know, and as we go back and we meet our regulations in terms of going again and giving a report back to council on battery storage projects, we will show it does pencil. So it's important for us to keep that in mind, that the technologies do evolve, they may become easier, they may become more effective as there's more value streams. And as we mentioned with trolley as nauseum, it's in Southern California where power costs go negative. So it's just a different animal in terms of that. So I just wanted to provide that as in context. Palo Alto is moving absolutely forward, as you well know, on SCAP and looking at affordable, scalable technologies, and we'll continue to partner on SCAP as utilities, but with affordability in mind.
I had a couple of comments. Jonathan, I just want to thank you again for your commitment to this entire process. I know that you are coming at this from a place of sincerely wanting to see these technologies here in Palo Alto, and also prioritizing what makes sense for the community in terms of balancing affordability and progress. So I just want to recognize that sentiment. And also just really, I do think that there's a lot of work that went in here. It's nice to see the depth of analysis. I want to remind everybody that this is just part of a broader SCAP plan, right? This isn't intended to be the entire SCAP plan for Palo Alto. There are other things happening simultaneously, right? So this is part of it. I do want to also specifically comment on the alternative that the SCAP raised, and I think that that was, a response to trying to do more. Which is great. I guess I personally looked at this and questioned whether this was the pathway that was going to yield the greatest benefit the soonest. And I bring that up because I think that, reoccurring and widespread outreach is great, but there's simply not, as you've shown in this analysis, like all that many customers who are on the cusp of being in a position to doing that, in a position to do this from a residential perspective, which is really like the widespread component. I would say in contrast, like Carla's discussion earlier this evening about how engagement with key customers, key large customers, is a really big part of the Resources Division's mission. And that specific engagement for customers where, the break-even costs are we're like much, much closer to break-even. Like, to me, that makes tremendous sense. And those customers, frankly, are not just commercial and industrial customers that happen to be located within Palo Alto. They're also the utility itself, right? And I think that, first and foremost, this opportunity to look at city resources where it makes sense as large customers and iron out, the engagement process there's a much lower barrier to engagement when you say, hey, there's a project on city property that pencils, let's make it happen. I'm not going to comment on specific facilities, but to me, clearing barriers there saves all of your residents money instead of saving some specific residents that have the resources to go and do this probably anyway. And it really is going to help with long-term affordability challenges if we can, if there is a positive, return on that investment, right?
Yeah, definitely agree with the focused outreach on major facilities. And in fact, I think those are really called out, and helping people evaluate those projects case by case. That's definitely the intent there. And I think with city facilities, there is a regular, my sense is that there's a regular, as projects are developed, there's a regular push to look to see whether solar or storage is a value there, and there have been systems built in recent years. A good example is the tie-in with the public safety building to the adjacent solar system that can extend the diesel backup, the duration of time that they're able to run with their diesel backup system, so.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to get us to a point that is maybe, A, helps us all support this, and B, addresses the question of, are we doing the 2B as staff recommendation or the optional alternative to 2B? And I would just say, we have key account managers already, right? I'm not sure we need another FTE, but making sure that key account managers are empowered and educated around the models that the consultants have developed and where their key customers sit there, can facilitate those conversations, can help to clear barriers. Those are existing FTE. Let's make sure they have the education to do that.
Yeah.
And let's make sure that, I don't know if there's a key account manager for city property.
There is.
Great. Then that person, empower that person to go around and do the most they can to get, where it makes sense, facilities converted, where it makes sense financially to get cities to the city assets to adopt these technologies.
Yeah, I don't think additional resources are needed to pursue that. That's what we would pursue.
Yeah.
That's what we would pursue under the
Under the standard 2A.
Yeah,
Great.
absolutely.
And
Okay.
maybe I'll add on to that I agree the focus should be on both the
Commercial,
city, but also large commercial. I mean, the solar and BESS
Yes.
for the large commercial is close enough that there's got to be some customers for who the resilience benefit or just their desire to move ahead and, be leaders in this space would, I think, push them over the edge without any kind of subsidy from the city, assuming we can reduce the barriers. So, I mean, going to the account managers for those accounts and, saying, look, lay out the benefits here, plus the benefits, the amount of money is so much greater involved there. The potential benefits are so much greater than in the residential side. Yeah.
Can I just manage expectations just a little bit around the commercial cost benefit?
No.
Yeah. I think the break even is a really positive thing. However, it's worth remembering that a break even is like an 18 to 20 year payback, and to devote commercial capital to a project, you need a 2 to 4 year payback. So I think that gap is still there. Reducing barriers in the commercial space probably requires some greater creative thinking, but we can certainly be promoting that to those customers. There will be customers for whom the reliability and resiliency value is so high that it is just worth it to them, even if it is an 18-year payback. So we would still just continue to pursue it.
If you factor in the benefit from the resiliency and in monetary value, it comes to a 2 to 4 year payback.
Well, and I would just point out that most of our municipal utility investments on the water and wastewater side have 30 to 50 year investment cycles. So let's please look at those. Do not share that same constraint. Okay, Commissioner Metz?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to make some comments for moving forward on one aspect, namely long-term resilience, which is addressed in page 6 and page 7 of the presentation. First of all, I'm gratified that long-term resilience is addressed in the presentation, albeit as a to be determined. However, I think the approach that's suggested, particularly on page 6, which is essentially a cost-benefit NPV kind of analysis, is not the correct approach for making decisions regarding long-term resilience in the face of high risk and high uncertainty events like earthquakes, or wildfires, other sorts of emergencies. So I'd like to make recommendations for addressing this topic, since it sounds like we're saying that we're going to do something about it in 2026. I think the first thing is CPAU should definitely be investing in electrical emergency preparedness and resilience. CPAU has, I think that's kind of not supported in the document, particularly in some of the earlier versions. But I think CPAU has long accepted responsibility for resilience beyond the short term. We have water wells with backup diesel generators. We have undergrounded power lines in the foothills. So, I mean, I heard the word, I counted 6 times the word pencil used here. I think those things definitely don't pencil out, but we do them anyway, and it's obviously the right thing to do. So I think that's the first thing, that we need to invest in that. And I think CPAU has a unique strength and responsibility to articulate and quantify what it would take to do that. What are the options for the city council and for the community to consider? I think the second thing is to consider the impacts of such investments by CPO in the city and by residents. I think at least what I inferred from the document was not to consider investments by residents. And I think that we need to, and the reason is that those investments have community value. We have shelter space in an earthquake for several hundred people. There's 60,000 people in the city. The community requires people to be able to stay in their homes during an emergency. So I think any effort that anybody makes to make that happen is of great value to the community. Number 3, I think in the analysis and planning for CPAU reliability and resilience, I think it's really important to explicitly consider risk, especially the risk of major emergencies. I think the reason these things don't pencil out, and they never will, unless risk is considered, and I think the risks are quite real, is because if we assume that the grid operates with no problems and no risk of failure, you know, the grid is already optimized. All the distribution, transmission, generation that has been built up over a century really is optimized for that situation. And if we assume that situation continues, then there's no need to do anything else. I think that's just a bad assumption. So, and what it calls for, I think, as Director Curatori mentioned earlier, is a scenario-based approach to think about, you know, if there was an earthquake, what are the options? What do we need to be doing? And I think it needs to be done in coordination with Palo Alto's Office of Emergency Services. We're fortunate to have a group like that, which most cities don't, especially a small city. They use a methodology which is called assets at risk, which a lot of emergency preparedness organizations use, which is quite different from cost-benefit kind of analysis. So I think it's really important at least to coordinate with those folks and probably take a page from their book in terms of how we attack the problem. I think number 4 is communicate the results. After doing such an analysis with OES, communicate the results to City Council and the residents in a detailed and transparent way. Transparent means so not experts can understand it. Detailed means that the experts supporting those people can take a look at it and decide if it really makes sense. And that was a problem I had with the current report, is I've done a lot of these sorts of analyses, and I just didn't see the detail to be able to assess whether the, you know, the penciling out calculations were correct or not. And finally, to build and maintain competencies in reliability and resilience, including emergency preparedness. I think this is a large, important, and strategic problem and challenge for CPAU, and that's the kind of a challenge where any company or government organization should be building its own capabilities and not relying on outsiders for doing the work. I mean, certainly you can call on outside experts for skills when you need them, but if something is core, it seems like we should be building the capability to address it. And that's what I'd like to propose going forward. And happy to discuss.
So I just wanted to, talk about, I'm sorry, my laptop is making a lot of noise. Talk about Commissioner Metz in terms of that reliability. And I think a couple times it was mentioned, former Director Dean Batchelor talked about looking at storage and potentially putting at the substation. So as part of our January update on where we're at in grid mod, we're going to have an update in terms of what that looks like. So we've had some time to do some analysis at our substations, look at the age, look at our 60 kV loops and, how our feeder system works out. So we'll bring that back for an early look in terms of our preliminary results to this body in January, and that's on the 12-month calendar. So I hope that is helpful in terms of our commitment looking at those technologies.
The one thing I would suggest, if we're doing that, at least touch on it qualitatively, at least at this early stage, on impact such a thing could have in an emergency.
Yes, so when you have grid-tied batteries, it depends where you have them connected. Is it providing for, distribution loads in terms of the 12 kV feeders that go to the businesses and residents? Who's going to be the beneficiaries? Where is it tied into that grid? So point well taken.
Right, and that was Commissioner Tucker's comment too about the location of storage, right, agreed.
And I do just want to say that some of the topics you're talking about are the types of things we would be talking about in 2026. We laid out in packet page 83, section 7.6, the city's current policies around incentives for individual or for microgrids, essentially, which is really what you need for that long-term resiliency, and the solar and the battery. And talked about how the utility passes through the value of the utility supply through via our feed-in tariff programs and net energy metering, which enables individuals who value long-term resiliency high enough to put in solar and storage themselves if they're willing to pay the additional cost. And it talks a little bit about some of the alternative policies that you could have and some of the choices that you have to make about who gets the benefits and how much money you're able to devote, and how you prioritize where those incentives go. And those are some of the things that we can talk about in 2026 in terms of dealing with long-term resiliency.
Yeah, I think it's really important to address those, and I think it's really essential to address it in the right way, and which I think definitely goes beyond a short-term cost-benefit kind of analysis.
Can I ask, kind of, just to dig into the emergency, I am not up to date on exactly what our emergency plan is. I do know that the water treatment plant has several days of backup fuel, and there was a discussion of generators in this plan that was, or in this report that was given to us. But the long-term kind of emergency resiliency in the long-term sense of the word, which I think is, if there were kind of a long-term break in our electricity supply, what is the plan? I believe there probably is a plan, and I'm just wondering, can you refer us to it? To me, in the emergency scenario, it doesn't have to be carbon neutral necessarily. This is like very low likelihood, but high criticality. So can someone comment on where any policies are?
I think we have agendized that for the January meeting. Is that, sorry, you're going to have to refresh my memory, but.
Why don't you continue? I'll look at the calendar real quick.
But this is agendized?
This is agenda.
Topic.
This
Okay,
is
got it.
specifically the topic that we are committing to talk about. So I think it makes sense to, rather than do a half-baked job of it today without adequate preparation as a commission, to have a detailed discussion about that in January. I believe it's January.
January, I'm looking at the calendar, it talks about the grid mod project update and the battery storage, so.
I thought there was,
Let me just,
There was a mention in the director's report, the last bullet.
yeah,
that's right, I think it's January.
it is January, but it's not showing
But
on
it's
the
not on
calendar.
here.
Yep.
Okay, anyway, if we can defer that, I am very conscious of the time. We are at the end of our allocated time for this discussion item. Do you have any proposed amendments to what we would vote on? And if not, can we please vote?
I do have the amendment that I would like to see if there is support amongst the commissioners for the annual update for electricity prices on the model. So it's on 2C, currently says within 2 years, update cost-benefit analysis. There is no statement for how long into the future we go, but I hope that this model is useful farther in the future. So I would propose within 1 year, update cost-benefit model for electricity prices, comma, and within 2 years, you can continue with the line, but that just assumes once. And so the thing I was proposing was
Yeah, so-
annually. And so,
Yeah,
you know, I don't know if there's some reason why we have an end date to when this would be useful, but it could be,
how about just annually update benefit cost analysis for
update cost-benefit analysis annually for electricity
electricity
prices.
prices?
And every 2 years.
And within 2 years?
And within 2 years or every 2 years for.
I don't think you want to commit people to doing this in perpetuity.
Yeah, so
So
update
just,
cost-benefit analysis for other flexible energy technology inputs within 2 years.
Jonathan, does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we need to propose this amendment after it's been moved, right? Not right now? I'm sorry.
So somebody needs to make a motion, and the motion could be the staff recommendation plus this modification.
I'll make that motion for the staff recommendation plus the edits to item 2C with the annual electricity price update.
I second that.
Excellent. Do we have any further discussion on that amendment or concerns with the motion? Hearing none, let's call the roll.
Commissioner
Or the
Metz?
vote, sorry. I don't know why I said roll again.
I'll abstain.
Commissioner Tucker?
No.
Commissioner Phillips?
Yes.
Commissioner Croft?
Yes.
Vice Chair Mater?
Yes.
Motion carries 3 with 1 abstaining and 1 no and 2 absent, Commissioner Tucker, or Commissioner Gupta and Chair Scharf.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan, for coming this evening. We'll now move on to item number 3, approval of Utilities Advisory Commission fiscal year, FY 2027, Budget Subcommittee to serve a term from December 3rd, 2025 through June 3rd, 2026. We'll start with a presentation, we will proceed to public comment, and then we'll have commissioner discussion.
Excuse me, just a point of order. I thought we were voting on adding, whether or not to add the amendment and not voting on the,
I think there was only a single motion, and so would you like to revise your vote?
I would.
Okay. Can we revise votes?
I thought we had to
Yes.
vote separately on whether to add the
I see.
amendment and then whether to accept the amended
Okay.
proposal.
I think because there was only a motion with the amendment, and there was not an original motion, we only voted one time, but if you would like to amend your vote, I would be happy to allow that to happen.
Okay, but I only have to do it once, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Is it with the option or without the option? That 2B, whatever.
It is without what we voted on was not the alternative. We voted on the city's initial staff proposal with an amendment to include an annual update with electricity prices.
Okay.
And you would like to not abstain, but rather?
I'd like to vote no I have high respect for the work that was done and also the management of the team. But as I said on July 9th, the detail is just not there. And I've done a lot of this sort of work, and there's just no way for me to make a decision about whether the answer is right or not.
Okay, so could we please re-record Commissioner Metz's vote so that we now have 3 yeses, 2 noes, 2 absences, and the motion carries?
I will put that down for the record.
Thank you. Okay, now we are on agenda item number 3, which I already read once, and I'm not going to read again. We'll have a presentation, public comment, commissioner discussion. Alan, are you giving the presentation?
I just have a couple
It's very brief,
slides.
yeah, it should be very brief.
What we tried to capture from the last meeting is kind of the structure and of some of the suggestions and comments from the UAC. If we can just go to the next slide. So as part of the,
I don't even understand quite the title. Are we deciding who will be on the subcommittee? Because the title says something different.
Yes, we are approving the existence of a subcommittee, and then we are hoping to staff that subcommittee tonight, or at least develop a plan of action for staffing that subcommittee.
I did not realize its existence was even in question. I'm sorry.
Okay, so that is being covered by this presentation.
yeah, so just wanted to provide some guidance in terms of the subcommittee, and it's a temporary body that is formed. It needs to be a subset of the group. This is very similar to what we did, in looking at the gas COSA. It's for a single and limited purpose, and it's dissolved. So there's a timing issue as well. So it is not an evergreen one that continues. So so I just want to put that in context of what this committee would be formed. If you go to the next slide. So these are some of what we heard from the commission in terms of your discussions, and there was a series of ideas that came from this group in terms of looking at that. So we tried to kind of distill that into kind of buckets and areas, and then tried to kind of put that into a staff recommendation, which talks about our financial plan, the forecast, looking at affordability and centralizing on that electric utility. Of course, this body can decide on the scope, what they feel the topic should be specifically, and then in the membership, if you would like to create that ad hoc group.
Great. Thank you, Alan, for that. And I'm now going to invite public comment.
If any member of the public would like to speak on item number 3, please raise your hand or press star 9 now. No hands raised.
Okay. So now we can proceed to discussion about whether or not we will have a budget subcommittee this year. We have had a budget subcommittee for many years in the past. The issue is that it cannot be a standing committee because there cannot be standing committees. So we need a very defined scope and term, and then ideally rotating membership so that there is not a de facto standing committee, okay? That's important for compliance with one of the many acts that I am not going to pretend I know the name of. So could we start by understanding who served on the budget subcommittee this year? 1, 2, and then Gupta. Okay, Commissioner Gupta. Wonderful. And the scope of the budget subcommittee this year, from my recollection, was primarily around rates and did not necessarily include a broader review of utility reserves or rate assistance programs. Is that correct?
That is correct. We also looked at the finances, for example, for fiber to the home, not
That's right.
just the rates, but the business plan.
But the general finances surrounding fiber to the home.
Correct.
Fiber to premises, great. Okay, so it is my determination that this scope is sufficiently distinct from past committees, that it is passable, and we've I make that determination not independently, but in conjunction with utility staff. If there are issues or concerns that commissioners have on this scope, this is the time to discuss that. It does reflect several of the things that have been on our priority list, but are going to be very difficult to handle as a full commission because of the, I think, importance of back and forth with staff, the importance of having longer cycles to probe some of the nuanced issues that underlie this. But in forming this committee, the committee itself has no decision-making authority. Your responsibility in serving on the committee, or I should say the committee's responsibility, is to come back to the UAC and report out on their findings in conjunction with staff reports. And then we would consider all potential changes to rates, utility reserve policies, and rate assistance program options as a full UAC before bringing that to council. Is that clear to everybody?
I have a question about it. So the prior finance committee also served as, basically staff would ask us, can we meet to have a pre-look at things that they wanted to present here but would like some feedback on whether this is clear enough, is this enough information, what do you have concerns about? And that was very useful. So I'm assuming that is part of this, even though it's not listed as the scope, is a tool for staff as well?
I think we'll stick to the topic. If it's in regards to the topic, then that will be the conversation. We do not need to narrow that scope in terms of those discussions. So if it's related to the topic that is going to be approved or move forward by this body, then yes, we would have those conversations. Again,
generally, there's, however, no limit on, there's a practical limit on how much pre-engagement staff can do with the commission, but staff is not limited by the Brown Act, and so if staff wants to come to us as individuals in one-on-one meetings, in terms of preparation, that can happen.
Correct. If there's briefings that individual commissioners would like to have in terms of understanding the budget or that process, those are separate and distinct. What we avoid is having what in the industry they call serial meetings, where you have conversations, and that means information that staff receives or you receive is transmitted to one or more parties. That is not what we can do. What we can do is provide you briefings, information, but the intent for this subcommittee is to have a subset of the commission kind of work through an area that you would like to see further addressed or in higher level of detail as the vice chair has described.
Okay. So are there any other concerns with the scope or discussion on the scope of the committee? Commissioner Smith?
Could you just summarize what the scope is?
These three topics.
So these were the proposed topics. What staff has put together under the recommendation is what our initial cut of what that topic would be, right? So and looking at the financial plan, the rates, and then the affordability concerns, and we focused on the electric utility. That's what the primary kind of conversation we gleaned from the commission. The commission, of course, could expand that to look at the electric utility and say potentially the water utility. But we'd like to keep it kind of refined in terms of what your area of focus is, and then we can do that deeper dive.
Can I ask a quick question? I think the utility reserves discussion and the mention in the staff report that you were doing a utility-wide review on reserves policies.
Correct.
My understanding was that was going to come to this committee first and for review, discussion, iteration, and then come to the UAC as a whole. Is that not the plan because the utility reserves policy is utility-wide and this would be electric utility-specific?
Yes, so as I mentioned as part of, I think the director's report, is that we are doing an evaluation of our reserves across the entire utilities, and
That's right.
our intent is to bring that back. It doesn't need a subcommittee per se to have
Okay.
that conversation, because we're going to do that evaluation, and we can bring that back to the full commission. I think these were the topics that came up from the commission. There's opportunities to provide that information to the commission as a whole, and then there's where, as you were saying, liking to know the deeper dive and what levers, what options, what opportunities. That's where I think the subcommittee kind of thrives.
Okay, so just to clarify then, the staff recommendation is not necessarily to cover utility reserves or item number 2, but rather item number 1 and item number 3 in reference only to the electric utility.
The financial plan is part of it, is really it. The utility rate assistance program, right? So that has come up in terms of affordability, that could be, specific to that in terms of if the subcommittee would like to look at some other alternatives, that's something that we could be inserted as a distinct item.
Yeah.
I think maybe you just answered it, but if something comes up in a utility other than electric, then one could change course a little bit, or could the committee change it during the year, or do you have to wait till next year?
We would stay narrow to the topic that this commission is focusing on. If there's something that comes outside of that, and it would want to be addressed, and then the UAC could have a separate conversation in terms of the need for that.
UAC could decide mid-year, this is a financial issue, a budget issue from a different utility, let's use the subcommittee that we have, we could.
Yeah, so we would want to work that into kind of the workload and the commitments and your work plan, so to the extent that could be accommodated, it can be. There's always that opportunity to create smaller subcommittees, just like we did for the gas COSA.
Yep.
But it's not something that we're looking to do on a series of items in terms of the staff capacity and the focus to your work plan.
Understood.
I have a question.
Yeah, please.
Or a comment. The last meeting, I believe, was the one where we saw the rates with the perpetual large increases 5 years into the future that I think several of us were very concerned by. And it wasn't just, I don't have the table in front of me with all the utilities that were, to blame for that large increase, but I remember it certainly wasn't only electric. And my thought was, are there other things we can do to, reduce the cost of delivering everything? It might be beyond the electric utility, just understanding the finances, where are we going to find some opportunities to cut it so that every year isn't a 9%, 7%, 8% increase, which I think is beyond the rate assistance program. It's affordability for literally everybody. At those rates of increase, it's a concern. So I would like that recommendation to be broadened to the affordability of, everything, or we could carve out a few that aren't, refuse was not increasing at all. We didn't see that. I don't know how much we can affect that, right, because we don't deliver it. But I don't know how the other commissioners feel about that.
I agree with that. I would just put full stop after the word forecast. Right, that's what the budget is.
Under staff recommendation.
Yes.
5-year forecast period.
Yeah, I think that would be fine too.
So respectfully, it's overly broad. In terms of that, it's supposed to be, the guidance is for single purpose, narrow scope. I think looking at the financial plan and the 5-year forecast for all utilities would be deemed overly broad. So I would request that we could have a little more specificity in terms of the interest, versus coming back to the
Perhaps
commission as a whole.
for cost reduction opportunities. I mean, that's the main issue, isn't it? That Commissioner Croft raised.
Mayor Lowing had a comment, so maybe.
Yeah, I presume that you're interested in doing this from these other, from the 1, 2, and 3, just to sort of get ahead of the curve, study things sort of offline in a smaller committee, and then have those folks advise you more broadly, right?
Yes.
And then to Commissioner Met's last question, review of 27 financial plan and 5-year forecast will happen for all the utilities in front of this commission. So that's why the director is trying to narrow the subcommittee a little bit. And just another comment on the legality of this Brown Act, which I always have to keep from adding adjectives to how frustrating it is to work with this. But when he discussed a serial meeting, that means 3 of you that are on the committee can talk about whatever you want in that regard, but you can't call the other 4 and say, what do you think about this? That only happens when you come back here. And I think you know that, but I wanted to just kind of underscore it.
I think I understand that the entire commission would look at the budget, but I think these, as shown this past year, these subcommittees are really valuable in drilling into the issue in much more depth than you can do in a meeting, even with a week's preparation. Or
Yeah, and it can also save time of the
Save time, exactly.
7 of you when you bring it back and it's already distilled and you already asked a lot of questions. There's no question about that.
So maybe this needs to be trimmed in some way, but I still think having a few people do a deep dive, who are good at finance, doing a deep dive on the budget is really valuable to us.
Right, but if you did it with all the utilities, you'd have like 4 committees and they would have staff work of 4 more committees. So there's a workload impact on staff. That's all I'm commenting.
Maybe it's, I mean, for example, the whole idea of the credit card fees came up in a subcommittee, right? Of not paying, having the utility not pay those. It crosses all the utilities. So maybe it's administrative as well, where you're, spreading the, I don't know if we could just say that's incorporated in the electric section.
I mean, we do have a unified bill, right? So if you make a change like you were suggesting and that we're progressing toward in terms of credit card fees, it's a unified bill. It's going to be a positive for all the utilities. So that is an example, a positive example where we're talking about one that may benefit the rest. So there is some potential for that, but I trying to keep it as narrow scope as possible to stay within the Brown Act requirements is, I think, beneficial to have that back and forth that I believe that the subcommittee really benefited from, and as did staff.
If we were to recast this as a review of, even instead of the FY27 financial plan, which is in fact itself broad, but instead focused this subcommittee on administrative opportunities for like long-term cost increases, or maybe more elegantly phrased as opportunities for cost savings or cost-cutting measures across the utilities, and a study of those options or support of staff evaluation of those options vis-a-vis trade-offs with service, because, I mean, there's going to be trade-offs in cost-cutting measures. Is that and seems well within the scope of the UAC in terms of evaluating or providing guidance not on operations, which are the responsibility of staff, but rather the underlying values balancing, say, cost savings and affordability against service, or priorities around decarbonization or whatever else?
I think something like opportunities for cost cutting, top opportunity, doing a sort of Pareto on what are the top cost cutting opportunities.
This, to me, seems like a very different committee, though. I mean, I'm speaking from having been on the budget subcommittee. I mean, a lot of it is, and it looks like we would be asking staff to be doing significantly different work, which I think would be very worthwhile. and,
I think
but
we
would be
can't,
somewhat different from
you
what,
know, I think we can't have the committee that we had this year, is the point.
what do you mean?
Like, the committee we had this year, we cannot have again.
Even the same people?
No, like, the scope of this year's committee is not allowable going forward.
Because it's too broad.
It was too broad.
So let me just pull on that thread.
But I guess I'm not,
I guess I said it out loud and I wasn't supposed to, but
to be clear, I'm not saying we should have the same scope.
Yeah.
I'm saying these are specific issues that a subcommittee should dig into, because I think it would save us a lot of time and effort.
You like the way it is?
And so, you know, yeah, I do like it the way it is. I do think we've called for this question of what are the options now, you know, particularly since the red flag was raised last month that, oh my God, we're looking at, you know, these huge increases in the future. I would love to see like a recommendation of a process for identification of options for reducing costs or reducing cost increases, at least moving into the future. I don't think it has to be the remit, or should even be the remit, of this particular subcommittee, just personally.
So you need two different committees then? Is that what you're saying? I mean, I wouldn't disagree with that statement, because it
Yeah.
seems like that's what you identified.
Yeah, I think was what I would think. I mean,
it's two separate committees.
yes.
And the first committee would do which of these items? Because I think we've been told that the 27 reserves is not in this current staff recommendation, and this current staff recommendation is only the electric utility. Would you keep the staff recommendation or change the staff recommendation in some way?
I would look at the financial plan and 5-year forecast for the electric utility, and probably for the others as well, or particularly for gas. I mean, I think we've talked,
I don't think we can, well, maybe we could do it for 2 utilities, but not for 5 utilities? I don't,
So,
Kylie, you want to help with this?
so we've already done a deeper dive on the fiber utility last
Yeah.
year, right? And, you know, we've got that feedback and input, and we're doing that. I'm not sure there's going to be a huge amount of value in talking about the fiber utility. I would also represent that, I think the wastewater utility, I think we have communicated some of the challenges with that in terms of upgrades to the treatment plant. We've deferred other projects already. I think, you know, the focus and the opportunities may be, you know, really narrowed to the electric utility in terms of that. We receive supplies from Hetch Hetchy, and we have also pushed projects. So that's what we heard from the last meeting. Again, if there's maybe an interest to do the electric and the water side, you know, that seems narrow. And, you know, we could do a deeper dive in that regard.
Just looking, I pulled up the rate schedule from the last meeting, and electric and water seem really like the two that are way, way above inflation, especially water. And I don't know, you know, not having enough knowledge about where costs can be cut on either system. I think that's also just kind of a consideration is, I don't know if it's, you know, we think there can be savings on the electric side, but admin seems, you know, like a place to look. And water was also really high. Water's like 10% going every year.
But
I think
there's,
gas also, there's the issue with, you know, labor costs have become a very large fraction of the cost, and we have the broader issue of, you know, what do we do with the gas utility?
I just want to remind everybody that everything will come back to the commission eventually, so we will talk about these things anyway. I think the question is, what thing in particular would we most benefit from a deep dive evaluation of?
Well, the director was suggesting that you add water to this motion and go home.
Is that okay? Okay, Kylie says it's okay. So would people support adding water to this motion?
I support it.
Okay, great. Are we also proposing a second subcommittee to look at broad cost-cutting measures, or are we just doing this? And maybe we roll those two together.
You just put two of the cost areas into the first motion, so.
Great, Okay.
We're just doing this.
We're just doing this. Fabulous. I just didn't want to cut anyone off. Okay, so do I have a motion to support the formation? I need to say this correctly. Well, actually, apparently we will do the motion when we have commissioners identified. So do we have any volunteers to serve on this committee?
I volunteer.
Okay. Any other volunteers?
Does it have to be zero overlap?
No, there can definitely be overlap.
I'll volunteer.
Fabulous. Do we have a third volunteer?
It doesn't need three, it just
doesn't
can't
need
be,
three.
it just can't be.
It's a
four.
max of 3, it doesn't need to be 3.
Fabulous. Okay. Hearing no other volunteers. Oh, yeah.
So I know that Utsoff, who's not here, said he'd be willing. Utsoff, who's not here, said he'd be willing if you need 3 and you don't have them, he'd be willing to do it again. So I'll just.
That can be added later,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So I'm not going to speak for Commissioner Gupta, having not had an opportunity to speak for himself, nor know the specific scope. So instead, I will appoint Commissioner Phillips.
You'll nominate.
I'm going to, sorry, that's correct. I'm going to recommend a motion. Am I allowed to advance a motion? Or do I need someone else? I'm looking for somebody to move that Commissioner Phillips and Commissioner Tucker serve on a budget subcommittee from December 3rd, 2025 through June 3rd, 2026, with a defined scope of reviewing the FY27 financial plan and 5-year forecast regarding affordability for the electric and water utilities. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Fabulous. Can you please call the vote?
Commissioner Metz,
Yes.
Commissioner Tucker, Commissioner Phillips,
Yes.
Commissioner Croft,
Yes.
Vice Chair Mater.
Yes.
Motion carries 502 absent.
Great. Okay, now we are moving on to our next item, and we are going to try to make up some time. So the item, fourth item on our agenda this evening is the Utilities Advisory Commission discussion on policy and procedure. Kylie, are you, we have a
Assistant City Manager Kylie Jose is going to help facilitate this conversation.
fabulous. I understand that there's a short presentation. We will then have public comment, and finally, we will have a commissioner discussion. And I know, I did not allow a bathroom break.
Sure.
I'm getting out of here.
Good evening, utilities. Commissioners, Kylie Jose, Assistant City Manager. If we could move to the next slide. This is really just a reference slide. It's a clip from the Muni Code on the purpose and duties of the UAC. You all know what it is. Next slide, please. So I tried to put together on one slide a visual just to help guide our conversation on what I think the UAC's question is that you wish to discuss, which is how do we as a body effectively communicate our advice to council? So at the very top are our governing bodies and the structure in which activities and work move. So there's council committees, and then the UAC. UAC is an advisory body to council. A lot of your work moves in and amongst these 3 bodies. So either council is making a referral to the UAC is considering it. Typically that will go then to a council committee for further vetting, and then to the full council for a vote. UAC can also make recommendations to the full council, and council would then need to affirm something and refer it back to staff and the UAC for further work. So all of the authority is happening in and amongst these 3 bodies, with the city council in all caps as the ultimate decision maker. They're the only ones that can direct staff work. So how is the work of the UAC shaped? There are a number of things, but try to enumerate some of the things that I think you all probably know, but maybe are some of those that are more visual can see. We've got regulatory things that we have to do. by state, local laws. We have our municipal code, has our purpose, our duties. We have your commission work plan, something that does need to go through council for approval, and then council priorities, something that's set on an annual basis and influences staff's work and the commission's work plan. So as that body of work is shaped, then the question is, how does the UAC communicate their work to the council? So many ways that can happen. Tonight, you just did it. You can do recommendations via staff reports, your motions. You communicate through those, your recommendations. You've done this in the past. You can write letters as a commission and provide those, and staff can forward that to council. You can have representation at council meetings as items move in and amongst. You can also hold joint sessions, joint Brown Act sessions. I don't want to say these four are the only ways you can do it, but in broad categories, these are the primary ways in which a commission would communicate with the council body. Whether it's a committee or the council in full, just depends on the path forward. So hopefully that's a little bit of an idea of kind of, what are the governing bodies? How does the work plan and work get shaped, and what comes forward? And then how do we use our voice to communicate within that governing structure? Oops. And then the next slide, I simply put some kind of discussion questions that we can try and think about and facilitate. So one of the questions that the UAC had was, when should UAC send representation to City Council? And some questions for the commission to think about would be, how do you determine, what is the determining standard practice for representation? When do you send someone? I put a recommendation of when you have complex or high impact items. To be honest, you want to use your voice judiciously. And then how do you identify who represents at the UAC? As an example, on the gas COSA, you all decided at the end of that item, you wanted a UAC commissioner to be representative at the committee, which was the next step in the process. And at that point, you guys nominated Commissioner Gupta, and he did, and it was great. The Finance Committee really appreciated it. We incorporated that feedback as part of the presentation to the committee, and I think that was a value add for expressing the UAC's voice on an impactful item. Another way of doing it, you could take PTC. PTC designates one commissioner every month, and whatever month you are assigned, you are responsible for representing items that are coming from PTC through the council bodies as a representative of the commission. So those are two different ways that it can be done. Either are okay, and so as a body, you should discuss how you would prefer to do this. The other is the whole question about a joint study session. And really, before we set a joint study session or even embark on this, the UAC should really think about what topics do you actually want to have a joint study session with the council at, and what are you seeking from that joint study session? Are you simply having a melding of the minds? Is it for you to advocate your opinion as a board? Is it to work through some sort of a gnarly problem where you want to have a multi-step process or more brains on it? So hopefully this is helpful just to kind of tee up this conversation. This does not need to be complicated, just for the commissioner's benefit. I honestly think it would be totally fine for you all as a body to say, at the end of every item, we want to determine if this is a recommendation to council. Does it meet the threshold of complex and high impact? Yes or no? If so, who's going to rep us? It could be as simple as that, or it could be as simple as what PTC has done, which is assign someone every month, and it's their responsibility that month to be that representative. There's all kinds of options in between, but hopefully that's helpful as a starting point.
Can I ask one quick question?
Of course.
We do also have, as a point of procedure, a council member appointed to this commission. What formal role do they play vis-a-vis these other things? And are there any other mechanisms by which council could actually ask for our input more directly if they had an issue that was coming before them that they felt would benefit from representation of the UAC itself?
Sure. Let me tackle the latter one and then actually perhaps turn it over to the mayor for his feedback. The council at any time can absolutely make a referral to the UAC. That's one of those pathways that can go back and forth. That referral can come from a number of mannerisms. The UAC could recommend the council refer a topic back to the UAC. So that would be, I'm trying to think of an example. Gas COSA is a great example. Thank you, everybody. UAC expressed their concerns with it, went through the finance committee up to the city council, and council said, we agree. We're going to send it back to the UAC. And so, yes, it took a few steps, but that's the process.
Okay.
So that would be UAC recommending. The council could alternatively choose to make a referral. Let's say they're going through their council priorities and they see something really difficult. And they're like, we're really trying to struggle between, let's take the topic you were talking about earlier. Is it penny wise, pound foolish for us to invest in certain things, right? We could either look at rate stability or lowering rates, or we can look at investments in new sustainability programs. And, UAC, can you go dive into this for us? They could make that referral on their own. Either can work.
Okay.
Mayor, perhaps you can help us with feedback of the role of the appointed.
Yeah, a number of comments. I think this is a helpful slide for the group. And I'll start with what was on my list, but not first, and I'm moving it to first based on your comments about, you have a council liaison. And the reason there is one here is because it's an important commission, and there's an awareness both directions, what the liaison hears and what that liaison takes back to council or committees. So that's always there. So that's like your first line of offense. And any of these other things that we talked about would anyway go through that channel of communication. So it's always there. Second thing is that in the event that you say, if you went as detailed as the assistant city manager said, and you voted after every item and said, we now want to have a representative go to either the committee or the council, I think that would be deemed a request to the council, because just looking at workload, if you had 12 1 month, we would say no. But you'll be able to spread out those things. So what I'm saying is that every time that you say, I want to come and give a report, we would have a discussion about that. And if it's, 2 or 3 people that need to come, or one needs to come, or it's a long report, then maybe we have to do something else to handle that kind of volume. The other, and we have to decide if it's the committee or the council that you want to, should go to. And so at that point, you take the chair of that body and have a discussion and then come up with a decision. The third thing I would just point out is that study sessions are very high resource usage, because we have, that puts 14 civil servants in a room, and all the public as well. So that would be a pretty big deal to make sure that we all feel like that's worth doing. And the other things that are on the screen here we've talked about can come first to, I think, accomplish a lot of those objectives. But the only other thing I want to say is that if there's any presumption that there's any indication that we're trying to cut off communication, that's totally wrong, because the whole objective of having this commission is to get advice to council. That's the name of the game.
So I want to say thank you. I want to invite public comment now, so that we're also hearing from members of the public.
If any member of the public would like to speak on item number 4, please raise your hand or press star 9 now. No hands raised.
Okay, so now we can go into discussion of what we would like to do, whether or not we would like to recommend any changes to how we're currently advising council, and hear any, that's it. Are there any changes that we would like to make?
I'd make a comment on the PTC, so the Planning and Transportation Commission. I'm somewhat familiar with that process because I'm married to a former commissioner. Two things. One, almost every council meeting, something comes up that went through the PTC, which is not the case with the UAC. So having somebody there at every meeting made sense because, I don't know, Mayor Lowing, what an immense amount of council time is taken up with planning and transportation issues, probably 10 times what's taken up with utilities. So I would not recommend necessarily that we just say this month it's so-and-so and they have to go to every meeting. I don't think that would be worthwhile. The second part is, of course, that when you do it, if we do that, that person is representing not their personal opinion, but the sense of the committee. So even if you were on the wrong end of a 7-1, 6-1 vote, you have to go in there and represent what the majority voted on and what the reasoning was for doing that. I mean, you can always go in as a private citizen and voice whatever you like, but when you're representing, when you're representing us, you have to represent the sense of the commission. So those just two comments there.
Yeah, thank you very much for both of those pieces
And on
of
the
feedback.
PTC, I would just point out that that's basically a on-call. They show up and unless there's already been a discussion with the mayor that says, here's what I have to say, I think this is how it could help, and the mayor and the commissioner have a chat about it. Almost always there's not a chat about it. And in fact, then one person's just standing by in case we have a question. So it's not like there's a particular agenda being brought. It's there as a resource.
Marilyn, you attend most of these meetings, right? I mean, you're a faithful attendee to UAC meetings.
I agree with that
Do you
statement.
feel qualified to advise on when you would like somebody to come, or someone from the UAC to come before council on a specific issue?
I'm going to answer that two ways. One, no, because this is your desire of this 7-person commission. So I wouldn't ever step on that, which is, we should also have a slide of what the liaison is supposed to do and not do. I've tried to model what they do and don't do. But the other answer is, first of all, what I said before, at any time that somebody, a representative wants an audience with council, they should go to the liaison first, who would then probably discuss it with the mayor anyway, and then make a call. And that's not going to take 3 weeks. I mean, just, that's, I think, is the best way to approach it.
Would anyone like to, does anyone have any other comments or
I
thoughts?
sort of had a question.
Please.
First, a comment. I thought the list of, situations where we should be connecting was good.
Your mic is in the air.
Commissioner Metz, can you move the mic down? Thank you.
Got out of control there. I said, I think the list of situations seems okay. Should we be having sort of generating our list of topics that we think fit those situations in advance, or should we be sort of waiting until they come up? I mean, some obvious ones, grid mod, data centers, reliability, resilience, those are topics that are sort of perennial and have been big concerns of the city. Budget, obviously, is going to be a big concern. Should we just be preparing to get involved more intimately in those issues?
Are you directing that question
Just to the
Kylie, or?
commission, I guess.
I mean, ultimately, I think it's a question for everybody, but I would encourage the commission to think about this in broader strokes than that. I don't think you have to be as prescriptive, because you're not setting in motion any ordinance or resolution. You're simply talking about how you as a body want to act and kind of standard rules of the road for how you as 7 members want to proceed. So I don't think you have to identify each of those issues. I actually think that can mire you down in debating, does this fit that or not, versus financial ramifications, or what's another one? Council priorities might be another category that's hits the level of that complex and or high impact items that you might want to keep an eye on. So I don't know that you need to identify the projects. I would actually encourage the commission to not identify the projects tonight. It may provide to be more limiting, frankly, as issues arise.
But an item, one of the items you mentioned there was grid mod. So if you came to the liaison and said, I want to talk about grid mod, I mean, that sounds like a study session, which is, another whole thing that we need to agendize. If it was in the context of some recommendation on grid mod that you had made, that changes it entirely, I think, in terms of the focus of the council. And of course, we plan out these agendas 2 to 3 weeks in advance. Well,
Right. That was actually my main thought is time, right? That it takes us time to get to a conclusion and then scheduling it, coordinating it with city council or even a subcommittee.
yeah, that's right.
Takes time.
And the other thing I wanted to mention is that it may be more appropriate for you to go, I'll just say more frequently, we haven't decided what frequently is, but more frequently to the finance committee than to the council for a couple of reasons. One is that it just so directly impacts our budgets, all the work that you do here and the staff does. And they are already at a detailed level on that. And the second reason is that the other 4 commissioners love it when it's pre-processed in the finance committee, which is, not quite as technical as this group, but pretty technical and pretty involved and intense hours and so on. So the rest of the council would appreciate bringing the finance committee up to speed if you think they need to be on an issue to take back to the rest of the council.
Commissioner Dugar?
I've watched Finance Committee, and they're pretty technical. They're pretty thorough. I'm impressed by those meetings. So this whole issue around process and the advisory function is something I've advocated for a while. Utsoff and I put together a draft commissioner's memo, and maybe I could just hit the highlights of one of those items, which is the, I've shared it with with Alan. And a lot of this you've heard us talk about. One item in the proposal or suggestion has to do with tracking and follow-up in the director's report. We talked about that at the start of tonight's meeting. That's why I was so encouraged to see it. Another item is one you've heard Utsoff talk a lot about, like clarifying what goes into the council consent calendar, and so what is a daily operation of CPAU and what is, and what is not. So that's a second item. But the item I'll just highlight our recommendation, and it's kind of like what Kaylee described. I believe that we as a UAC owe it to the council, whether they want to read the advisories or not, to offer our advisories on some, not all, items that we discuss, deliberate, and certainly vote on. And so and I think we should be doing that directly in addition to staff report. So a 3-part process where what we're recommending is that, one, in the director's report at the start of each meeting, all CPAU-related votes and discussions that took place at council or finance committee just get mentioned, listed briefly, So these significant agenda items at finance or at council came up in the last 3-4 weeks. So that we know about that here when we start our meetings. And then we also take a look forward at what items are on finance and council agenda in the next 3-4 weeks to come. That ought to be taken right off the rolling calendar that's written down. So there would also be, at this point, Alan, in the director's report, at least a couple minutes for a bit of discussion on items that were in the last month and items that are coming in the next month. And then third point, and then I'll be quiet, at the end of our UAC meetings, actually I'd suggest at the end of each key new business item, we decide and vote, just like we vote on any motion, does this merit an advisory? And I don't imagine that, I imagine most meetings we'll have 0 that require, but if it's something contentious or big or meaty and it's coming up on the calendar for council in the next 4 weeks, then yeah, it probably does merit an advisory. What's an advisory? It's either written or it's in person. And if it's written, it's short, like 3-4 sentences. And if it's in person, I've certainly heard everything that you've said, Mayor, over the recent months. It's not like we can claim a place on the council or the finance agenda, but we'll be there. And we'll at least say, we're ready to discuss that item that's on your agenda, answer questions, and convey to you what happened at UAC. UAC, we would decide as we voted that, Commissioner X or Y is the right person this month to go and represent that issue. And again, like I say, I can't imagine there'd be more than one, certainly not more than 2 items per month where we say, we ought to send a 3-sentence advisory, or we ought to go to that finance committee meeting because it's on the agenda and
Can I ask a couple of follow-up questions?
I'm done, so yeah. Mhm.
So we've instituted one, starting this month, independent of your recommendations. We did not have any pre-discussion, but this has been coming up, so that's great. Do commissioners like that approach and support that?
I loved it. I think it's great to have this kind of advisory from the director as part of the director's report.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So we'll preserve that. Recommendation 2 was understanding what is happening at city council. I would say that is already part of our 12-month rolling calendar. And so is there?
Just say it, it'll take 20 seconds to say the most important things coming up on finance and council this month are X and Y.
Okay.
We've already demonstrated tonight that we don't all memorize what's on the rolling
No,
calendar.
I understood, but I think, Alan, do you want to do that, or do you want to refer us to the rolling calendar to just?
So the way the process, and I appreciate Commissioner Tucker kind of, providing the colleagues memo and maybe, I think it's colleagues memo, but Commissioner's memo, excuse me, not colleagues. The intake of that is more of a formal process, so I'm following that process. And as part of the bylaws, the draft comes in, the director acknowledges that receipt, we work with the 2 commissioners who put it together, and then we bring that back to the full body for discussion. As part of that evaluation, staff looks at that in terms of capacity and impacts, and then provides that feedback to finalize that memo that goes back to the commission. So Commissioner Tucker's ahead of the game.
So I didn't just miss the memo.
No,
that's great.
You did not miss the memo. So
I called it a draft, and I don't want to go into all 3 of the components, I just mentioned them. But the 3rd component is the advisory process, and that's exactly what we're talking about here.
Right.
And I'm just essentially reading what I drafted, because it gives, as you just listed, the 3 components of this advisory function. 1, let's start the meeting with what we talked about, what we're going to talk about at council, and that we, with every major issue that we vote on here, decide, is this worthy of an advisory? If so, who's going to do it?
Okay, so do we, I'm sorry.
How is a written advisory different from a motion? And why wouldn't it be part of the motion? I don't understand that. I mean, if it's something we want to say to
Why not have it?
go, it should be the motion. And we should vote on it, because who's going to draft an advisory, and, what if, you draft an advisory, but Councilmember Metz doesn't agree with it, what's the process?
To Commissioner Phillips' point, similar to what you went through, actually, as you were drafting a letter, if you all recall, I think we spent a couple hours here wordsmithing, because ultimately, as you write something that is, you are speaking on behalf of the full commission. To the extent you're able to keep it short and include it in your motions, that's your most effective way, I would say, in terms of getting the body.
But what value does it bring beyond the motion, and why wouldn't you just include it directly in the motion?
That's what I'm saying, is I would simply put it as part of your motion, whatever your recommendation is.
Okay. Personally, I have no objection to having people, during the time in which we are raising a motion and then discussing the motion, in proposing that we include some sort of representation at council or at finance subcommittee. I do not want to make that a standard part of every like closeout of a motion, but I think that if anyone feels that that is warranted, that can be part of the discussion so that people can also counter that. For instance, if the mayor said, you know, that's all well and good that you'd like to discuss that, but realistically, that's on the consent calendar, and therefore, like, there isn't a lot of value in you doing that. That would be helpful discussion to be having as part of the broader discussion of that motion, in my opinion. So if that works for everybody, I think I would like to hear that from everybody who's on the commission, because I want you to all feel represented. But
So Chair, you're just saying.
Vice, I am vice.
Vice.
Thank you.
It's even better. So you're saying that just by exception, as we conclude an agenda topic, if someone would like to bring it to city council, they can just raise that as a suggestion and we can vote on it as an amended motion, right?
During discussion of the motion, someone can raise the suggestion that it be brought to, like, that there be a representative council. And we can discuss that and converge either formally as part of the motion or as a separate vote on the logistics of who and how that representation would occur.
I think that sounds reasonable. I guess just following up on what would happen next. So thinking about the times that this has come up in our group, like, should we have somebody go to council? It's typically around something that's a little bit hairy where we don't all agree. And so there are some outliers who have very strong opinions about something, and I think, if I recall correctly, or maybe all of us have some concerns, we're going to pass this, but, you know, we have some concerns, we feel like we should explain what those are to council. I guess the question is, and at one point, there was a mention that we could potentially have someone go to council and speak in the public comments. I don't know if that was just as ourselves, or if we would be allowed to do that as a UAC representative. So I'm just trying to figure out, like, what happens next if we do decide to send somebody, and for what?
And can private citizens who are also UAC members speak as private citizens is that allowable?
Let me answer the first question, or the first question first. I think if there's something that you feel is hairy, and you want, and particularly if it's controversial and split vote, then you should just come, as Commissioner Phillips said, you, like PTC, would just come and explain sort of both sides of the story. It was a 4-3 vote. Here's what the 4 believed in this situation. Here's what the 3 believed. You don't even have to disclose which side you voted on, but if it's that hairy, council members will have gone back and looked at this video anyway. So I think that's the best way to do it, is explain both sides of the story so that we get, you know, the full picture and any nuance, or if we haven't watched the video.
And would that be arranged by talking to you, that you want to come during the topic, to speak during the topic?
Yeah, I mean, you'd always start with your liaison, but it would then go to the mayor eventually, and as I said, quickly. And in terms of what you can do, the preference is what we just described. I mean, any individual has free speech rights and can speak about whatever they want, but it's better in this case, I think, to speak, giving us information from the advisory body that we've set up, that you sit on. That's where it's important to us, because it's specifically on the issue.
Commissioner Croft, just to give you the real-life example of Commissioner Gupta. So the UAC had decided at the end of the gas COSA that this was something that we wanted the UAC representation at the meeting. So staff stayed in contact with Commissioner Gupta on when that item was agendized and coordinated on, okay, here's where we're at. Here's the date, here's the time, here's how the procedure will work. And so he understood how and when he could then engage in the conversation. And, you know, we as staff happened to be the liaison to Finance Committee. I also informed, to the mayor's point, the chair of the Finance Committee that will have a representative so that they're aware and can matriculate that into the process as well. So he showed up, We went through the staff presentation, provided his comment on what, as the mayor just identified, was the entire commission's feedback, both whether it's the minority or the majority opinion, regardless of his own, and then was there for questions.
Okay. Given that there's a letter that is going to be issued and responded to anyway, I'm going to call the discussion on this item as over and say, I think we have a plan of action that I haven't heard any strong objections to. I think we've actually hit all three of the items in the letter anyway, so I don't know where that sits, but let's move on without further ado to any commission or comments and reports from meetings or events. Okay, hearing none. I wish everybody a very happy new year, as this is the last meeting of 2025. And I look forward to seeing you all in 2026. Adjourned. Oh, do I, we vote to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
Sorry, oh my God.
Since I heard the gavel
Okay,
come down,
Thank you.
it stimulated me to move for
Thank
adjournment.
you. Can you please move adjournment? We have a movement. Can we have a second? Second. Okay, now, all in favor? Okay, now I get to do it for third time's a charm. Oh, God.